let's talk a little bit about hand dyeing. Now this is a huge, wonderful topic. So I'm going to try to stay true to our short, concise videos to answer questions, but this one is going to be a little bit longer. But I hope you find it fun, and I hope it's as exciting for you as the topic is for me. My mother has been a seamstress and textile artist since the 70s. Myself, with my BFA in art education, I focused in color theory and color therapy. So it's a topic that we both really love. So feel free to ask questions. I'd love to start a conversation about hand dyeing and everything that goes into it. So let's jump in. We're going to start off with your fiber. And with fibers, we're going to break it into natural and synthetic. So natural fibers, there can be subcategories of plant-derived or animal-derived. Now, with a natural fiber, think of everything that goes into actually making the bolt of fabric that you purchase from your store. So it starts with your soil, your seed, your water, how that natural seed for plant or actual animal is grown, everything that goes into growing it, how it's cultivated, how it's harvested, how it's then taken as a raw material to a refinery to be refined, to be made into a thread, to then be further processed into a woven fabric. That woven fabric is then further chemically processed with sizing that it can be easily rolled onto a bolt and shipped to a fabric store. Woo, that's a lot just in itself. So back to a natural fiber, plant-based. Think cotton, linen. If you want to think animal-based, you're going to want to think wool, silk, etc. Now, there's synthetic fibers, okay? So these are generally petroleum-based fiber. Think nylon, spandex, polyester. There's a gray area. So rayon, I personally love rayon. It's a bamboo fiber, so you'd think natural fiber, right? But because of the chemical processing and refining process needed to make it into what is labeled rayon, it doesn't actually qualify to be a natural fiber anymore. So there's that gray area to consider. Okay, so now let's jump into the dye of actually hand dyeing. Same principle, you can have a natural dye and you can have a synthetic dye. So your natural dyes, think mineral-based, okay, so these are mineral compounds from the earth. Then you have your naturals, which can be plant or animal derived. Okay, and then you have your synthetic. So let's stick with natural first. So like I said, a mineral-based is going to be from a mineral in the ground, in the earth. Okay, and then you're going to have your plant, and then you're going to have your animal. And people think, animal? What dye would be derived from an animal? And there's quite a few actually. And actually, women's cosmetic industry uses a lot of them. So a really common one is cochineal. And that's a very, very small bug that gives a beautiful pink magenta color. It's gorgeous. And it's used in a lot of lipsticks and blush. So there's an example of a animal, or I should say insect-derived natural dye. Now the thing with natural dyes and mineral dyes is it takes a large amount of that natural resource to make the dye. Because again, think of everything that went into the processing for your natural fiber. Same things apply. How it's grown or raised, I should say. All the conditions that go into that. The harvest, the crop, the seed, the plant, the soil, all of that, and then taking it to a refinery where it is actually prepared into a dye, ground, refined, and whatnot, and then shipped off to your big company for you to purchase from. Okay, and there's all the different regulations in there between organic, fair trade. I mean, it's just so complex. But because of that, your natural dye holds a higher price point, and it should, because it consumes so many more natural resources in its actual production. Now, the thing with a natural dye is much of them are not color fast, meaning that they don't penetrate a fiber permanently. So now think back to organic chemistry of high school, okay? In order to have a natural dye become color fast on a natural fiber, because natural dyes need to be used on natural fibers, they have to go through a heat threshold. So back in organic chem, you learned about how heat can break down a molecular element. Same thing goes, you're mixing the organic chemistry of a plant or animal with another organic chemistry of a plant or animal for the fiber and the dye. So to have those two actually bond, most natural dyes are required to be heated and cooked for a longer period of time. Now, there are some exceptions to this, like indigo and turmeric. They don't require hot water heating and cooking for a longer duration. So there are exceptions in all of this. Most natural dyes require that heat threshold to open the fiber and open the dye, and then they also require a fixative or a mordant, which is another chemical added component to have that dye and fiber actually bond permanently. Again, turmeric and indigo are exceptions to that. They do not require a fixative or mordant, but they're not color fast, which personally I really, really love. Okay, so now let's look at synthetic dyes. Now, these are dyes that minerals actually kind of come in and out of this category. Again, it's a little bit of a gray area. Some synthetic dyes are actually mineral based from the ground, right? Elements, pigments from the ground. But then they're taken to a lab, a facility, whatnot, and they're sort of fractionated. And they're taken apart and then processed and refined, and stabilizing agents and whatnot are added in to make a laboratory-based synthetic dye. Super complicated, right? Cold water Procion dyes kind of fall into that category. It's a synthetic dye that is most commonly used in the professional field of dyeing your clothing because it's the safest form of dye. It molecularly connects to a fiber and permeates the fiber. So unlike a natural dye that can seep out, where some plants and animals are poisonous, a cold water Procion dye does not. It stays in the fiber, making it a really, really safe option. Now, it also, right in the title, alludes to the fact that it doesn't take the natural resources to heat it. You're using cold water to make your dye bath in it. So that's another element of a cold water Procion dye. Did I totally lose you? There's so many elements that go into hand dyeing before you even get to the hand dyeing part. So hand dyeing. This is how a pigment is actually applied to a fiber. And there's so many beautiful cultural traditions of dyeing. There's also vat dyeing and what's called direct dyeing. And vat dyeing is another culturally long-standing dye method. Direct dyeing is as well. It's a little bit younger of a dye method, but think tie-dye, okay? So this is where a dye is made into a liquid form and then directly applied onto a fiber. Okay, and then there's ice dyeing, and this is a relatively new form of dyeing. So there's constantly new dye techniques, and that's just a few. There are many, many, many more techniques of how the actual dye and fiber are put together in the hand dyeing process that you do with your hands. So I know that that was a lot. I hope it wasn't overwhelming. I hope it was more just exciting. And I hope it serves as a point for you to jump off and learn more. And I would love to see your creations. So as always, thanks for tuning in, and wrap with love.